Welcome to my channel, where the scariest stories come to life. Before we dive into today's chilling tale, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications, so you never miss a story. Now, let's get into the horror. I was 13 when this happened, and it still gives me nightmares thinking about it. My parents wanted to go out on a date night, so they left me home alone on a Friday night. I'm an only child, so I was going to be flying solo. We had a one-story home with a daylight basement that had its own entrance. We lived on a dead-end street that's pretty quiet in the evening, and not many cars come and go. We're a pretty close-knit community, so I felt like I had people to rely on in case something happened while I was all by myself. My parents left around 6 p.m. for their dinner reservation, and I grabbed myself a nice, hot pizza. I was ready to sit down and watch some scary movies all by myself. I was really excited. I locked the door behind them and turned on the TV. I was scrolling through the movies on my Roku app and decided to watch one of the Halloween movies. First, I snuggled up in my nice, warm fuzzy blanket on the couch, got comfy, and began my night alone. An hour passed by, and I got up to use the bathroom. While I was in there, I thought I could hear some weird noises coming from the basement. It sounded like something was being moved around. I figured, since I was home alone, what could it possibly be? I brushed it off as nothing. I finished in the bathroom and went back to my couch to finish the movie. Another 5 minutes passed, and again, there were moving noises from the basement. Now I couldn't ignore this. I started to get that nervous feeling in my gut. I stopped the movie to listen to these noises more closely. What was that? I thought about the entrance door down there and wondered if it was locked. I assumed my parents locked it, or at least I hoped they did. I didn't know what to do. I took a deep breath and walked towards the basement, putting my ear against the door. What a big mistake. I heard footsteps coming up the stairs immediately, and I froze in fear. This had obviously never happened to me before. I'd been home alone in the past, but that was mostly during the day. I know the obvious thing to do would be to call the cops. But did I do that? No, of course not. Instead, I ran outside and scrambled to my neighbor's house, banging on their door. Thankfully, they were home and let me in. I was out of breath, scared, and couldn't get the words out fast enough. I asked them to please call the cops for me because there was someone in my home. They called 911, and the cops arrived within 10 minutes. I also called my parents to let them know what was going on. I let the cops check out the house and stayed at my neighbor's, where I felt safe. After some time, one of the cops came over and said they didn't find anyone inside. They did say that whoever was down there seemed to have come in through the basement entrance. It must have been unlocked. Nothing was taken, and everything was in its proper place. My parents got home soon after, and of course, they were very upset and scared. The cops assured us the house was clear and told us to lock all our doors and windows at all times. They think this person saw my parents leave and assumed the house was empty. I don't want to think that this person knew I was home alone. After some thought, my mother said, "Oh no, I don't think we locked the basement door." She just assumed, since we lived in a quiet neighborhood, that we were pretty safe, so she didn't worry about it at all. Needless to say, after this night, we made sure every door and window stayed locked shut. They still leave me alone sometimes, but they always let the neighbors know when they do, just in case. I still think about this night, and it gives me nightmares. I'm 16 now, and feel a little uneasy being home alone. I know eventually I'll get over it, but please be safe out there. Always lock your doors, because you don't know who's lurking around. Back in the early 90s, there used to be a tiny drive-in movie theater in eastern Missouri along that narrow stretch of borderline with Kentucky. I used to go there often with my 2 older brothers and younger sister during the weekends. We had a flatbed trailer that we would hitch up to our dad's truck. He would set up our folding chairs, grab a cooler of beer, and watch the movie from our mobile platform. Most of the time, we didn't really care about what was actually playing. It was just fun to get out of the house and have the experience. I remember this night fairly well, because my brother had just chipped a tooth the day before. He had an ice pack held up to his jaw. I don't remember the name of the movie we were watching. I think it was some cop movie or something. Maybe I had my Empire Strikes Back t-shirt on for some reason, and I remember being barefoot as well. This was one of the first screenings of the summer, and so there were only 2 other cars in the lot. My brothers were arguing over something trivial, and my sister and I were sharing the cassette player and headphones, passing it back and forth between songs. We were all smoking and drinking and only half paying attention to the movie when suddenly we heard someone screaming from the trees to our left. My brother snapped his flashlight up to scan the tree line. After a few seconds, an Asian girl, maybe 18 to 20 years old, came limping and stumbling out of the shadows. She was completely naked except for a plastic bag around her waist. There was also a long nylon cord tied around one of her ankles. All 4 of us immediately jumped off the flatbed and made our way over to her. She was crying and gasping for air. She collapsed to her knees by the light of my brother's flashlight, and we could see that she was bleeding from a deep gouge behind her right earlobe. She had several bruises along her arms and face too. My older brother took off his windbreaker and put it around her, and we all began talking at once. I was suggesting we carry her to the truck, while my brothers were trying to talk to her and ask where she had come from and what had happened to leave her in this state. My sister handed her a bottle of water and was trying to talk above everyone else, proclaiming that someone needed to go find a phone and call the cops. Right now, I noticed another one of the drive-in customers get out of his car to take a look at what was happening. The owner of the lot was also making his way over to us. The Asian girl continued to hyperventilate and sob and kept glancing back behind her into the woods. As far as I remember, she hadn't said a single thing until that moment. Suddenly, she called out to run and tried to leap to her feet but staggered and collapsed into my brother's arms. I glanced up and pointed towards the trees, snapping at all my siblings to shut up. I noticed 3 figures, all apparently wearing burlap sacks over their heads, carefully stepping out of the tree line. Until that moment, none of us had made note of exactly how long the cord was that the girl was dragging behind her. One of the men in the sacks took a few careful steps forward until he was about 10 yards away. He placed his foot down on the end of the cord line. The frantic girl started screaming. My sister and I were cursing at these masked men. One of my brothers picked up a rock and told them to back off. None of the men moved. I remember scanning all of them for any signs of a weapon, but they didn't appear to have any. They were still mostly in the shadows, though the only way I could really see them was from the glare of the movie screen and the wandering beam of my brother's flashlight. As I type this out, I understand how ludicrous this must sound. Even thinking back on it, I have to constantly remind myself it wasn't just a dream or something I saw in a horror movie. I was on the front lines of a terrifying standoff that nearly resulted in bloodshed. The owner of the drive-in finally caught up with us and immediately raised his shotgun directly at the face of the closest masked man. He told him to get the fuck out of his property. I heard the sounds of tires rolling across gravel and glanced back toward the entrance to see 2 pickup trucks pull up, their headlights pointing right at our group. For a split second, I thought they were coming to help us, but then I noticed the deer skulls mounted on their hoods. The trucks just sat there, idling as silent as the 3 masked men in front of us. The owner didn't turn around and didn't even flinch. He called out again that if they didn't get off his property right now, no matter what those guys on the trucks tried to do, he was going to gun down all 3 of them. At least my brother, not holding the rock, had been frantically working his bare fingers at the knot of the cord around the girl's ankles, but to no avail. A lingering silence followed. It was right then when a thought crossed my mind that we might all die right here. After a few moments, though, the man removed his foot from the cord and took several steps back towards the woods. His friends followed suit without turning their backs on us, and they disappeared into the shadows. The two pickup trucks also spun out loudly on the gravel and took off down the road. The police arrived shortly after with an ambulance for the girl. A few officers combed the woods, but they didn't find anything the masked men had left behind. It turned out the girl did not speak much English. She claimed her name was Hildegard, but that always felt made up to me. For some reason, a week or so later, a man's body was found in those very same woods, by hunters. He had been beaten to death and had other various despicable things done to him. I think it was those burlap sack men who had done this to him. We never saw or heard from the Asian girl again, though we did inquire at the police station and hospital about her several times. I know a different TV news van showed up at the drive-in, but the owner refused to give an interview and chased them off his property. Regardless of the event being reported and televised, the word got around eventually, and the drive-in officially closed in 1992. The four of us were there at the last screening before it closed for good. The entire last week, the drive-in was playing Batman Returns. We saw it 3 times. My eyes weren't really on the screen, though. More often than not, I was glancing over to the spot where the girl had emerged from the woods. I was always nervous some masked figure might be standing there staring back at me. I will admit that even at my age of 47, I'm still afraid of the dark. Therefore, if I'm ever home alone at night, I can get a little nervous. I'm married with a 10-year-old daughter, and we live in a single-level home on a dead-end street. Thankfully, we do not have a basement or a garage, just a house to worry about. We live close to our neighbors too, so I usually always feel safe. This incident happened just last month. My husband and daughter went out on an overnight Cub Scout camping trip. I stayed behind because I had to work the next day. They left the house at 5 p.m., and I was kind of looking forward to having some time alone, watching reality shows, and enjoying a nice steak dinner. I settled down on the couch and enjoyed my meal. Around 6:30 p.m., though, I suddenly saw a shadow walk right by my front room window, moving quite fast. I assumed at first it was something innocent, like a small animal or a bird. Perhaps. I ignored it and continued watching my show. After 2 minutes went by, and again, a quick shadow moved by the same window. I started to get a little bit more concerned. This time, I paused the show and got up to check what was going on. Obviously, I didn't want to go outside by myself, so I just looked out the window. I didn't see anything, though. That's when I began to hear a scratching sound at my front door. I thought to myself, okay, what is going on here? I know we have stray cats around the neighborhood, but they've never scratched at the door before. We also have raccoons, but again, they never exhibited this behavior. Usually, they just run around in the backyard and look for food, which we do not have back there. I decided to check and make sure all the doors were locked. Thankfully, they all were. As I walked from the back of the house back to the front, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed someone standing in my glass sliding door that leads to the side of the home. I looked at him. There was a man just standing there, peering in at me with no expression on his face. He then creepily lifted his arm up and waved to me. I froze in place with my heart racing. What was I supposed to do in this situation? I ran to the front room where I had been watching TV and grabbed my phone to call 911. I began to hear what sounded like him trying to pry the glass door open. After a few failures, he started banging on the glass. I told the dispatcher to please hurry, because someone was trying to break in right now. She told me to remain calm and that the police were on their way. Stay calm? How can I stay calm when someone is trying to break in and maybe kill me? I ran to the kitchen and grabbed the biggest knife I had and just waited. I couldn't run out the front door to the car, the man would see me and get me. He walked over to the kitchen window where I was and tapped on it. What he said to me through it will always remain in my memory. He gave me this big, goofy grin and said, "I will always remember where you live." Finally, the cops showed up, and he took off. He didn't wear a mask, so I remembered and noted his face and what he wore. I gave all the details to the police, and they took a report. So far, he hasn't been caught, though. I told my husband what happened, and we changed the locks soon after. Since this occurred, I can't get any sleep. Any little noise wakes me. I have nightmares about him breaking in and just standing over my bed, watching me sleep. I'm thinking of getting some therapy to help get over this. Thanks for sticking around till the end. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to give the video a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a terrifying tale. See you in the next one.